You're standing on a street corner minding your own business when two pixies fly by on tiny wings. On the high-def 40-foot screen overlooking the street, a dragon talks about running for president, while the ticker underneath reports suspicious witchcraft at the Welsh Cup. This is our Earth, either present or past, but a touch of the magic we dream of really exists. How do we talk about low fantasy, and why do we write it? Today, the panel will weave a bit of autumnal magic of their own to talk about the building blocks of low fantasy. Speaking of the fantastic, C.L. Cannon conjures some books that you might enjoy if you're a fan of Matched by Ali Condi. Looking for evening entertainment? We run down this week's upcoming shows on our Go Indie Minute. As we transition into December, our panelists deliver you some of their writing magic in our epilogue. So strap on your leathers, grab your dead oak skull. It's time for another low-key fantastic This Week in Indies with your host, SM Hillman. That's right. Everything seems to be working just fine except my face. That's all right. Nobody can even see my face. Welcome to This Week in Indies. I'm your host, SM Hillman. When you hear the words low fantasy, what does that conjure in your mind? For me, it describes a world that is one or two steps away from our own, but instead of machines or science making the alterations, it's the supernatural or the unnatural or the mythological. Italian fairies, Japanese gods, Welsh magic. As our fantastic panelists introduce themselves, I'd like them to describe what is conjured in their minds when we hear low fantasy. And we are going to start with, hold on, I will find out in just a second. AF Stewart. Yeah?
Yeah, hi.
All mixed up again.
Yeah. I am Anita Stewart. I write under AF Stewart. That is my book now. I've written a couple of contemporary fantasies. I've written some low fantasy that's set in history. And to me, low fantasy is the fantasy that mixes with our world, as opposed to, say, made up world like in high fantasy. That's what low fantasy is to me. It can do it in a very sort of ways and different subgenres of low fantasy, but yeah, it's all our world plus fantasy.
Awesome. Thank you for being here today, as always. Tiffany?
Hi, I'm Tiffany Vega, and that was my book right next to me on the side. And that is the Elements book. That is my low fantasy series. And low fantasy is definitely part of our world. And like almost like urban fantasy, but just, centered into the real life.
Cool. Excellent. Thank you for being here today.
Thank
you. And SG Tosh.
Hi, I'm SG Tosh. I write the Death by Misadventure series. Well, I finished it up earlier this year. And that's my low fantasy / urban fantasy book. I agree with what everyone said about what low fantasy is, our world plus. For me, and this is not correct, I don't think, to the definition, but when I hear low fantasy, I also think of like cozy fantasy, simply because it's like high fantasy world, but it's such like concerned with more mundane things that look like our world, but are in like high fantasy dressing. So that might not be right, but it is what I think of when I hear the term.
Do you think it's a matter of stakes in that regard? Like a high fantasy, a cozy high fantasy, stakes are a bit lower?
For sure. I think of Legends and Lattes, where it's, the stakes aren't really saving the world. It's, making your way in the world. It just so happens that you're an orc and, you live in a place with orcs and wizards and all of that.
Gotcha. Awesome. Thank you for being here. My friend, Vanessa G.
That's me. So low fantasy is a term that I hadn't heard until a few years ago. And so when it first popped up on my radar, I was like, let me do all the research because I don't understand. Like, I know what high fantasy is, but I didn't recognize, like, I always, I read urban fantasy. I write urban fantasy, which, by the way, that's what I write, urban fantasy. And so there was nothing that used to come into my brain when low fantasy was mentioned because I'd never heard it before. And in my research, I found there are kind of two definitions, and one is exactly what everybody's been saying, which makes complete sense to me. And it's also called, y'all, it's also called intrusion fantasy. How about that? Where magic is intruding on a mundane world. And it doesn't even necessarily have to be our world. It can be a completely made up world. So like you could even have low fantasy in like on a space station or something, right? And so there's that. But there's also the difference between, and I think this goes back to what SG was talking about a little bit, is epic or mythic, big, like huge, like you think Lord of the Rings, right? That's a big story about big world changing things versus like small things, which goes to like the idea of cozy fantasy and stuff like that. So so those are kind of the two definitions I ran across. And for me, I don't like the term low fantasy because it makes it sound lesser. And so I just don't like the term at all, period. So that's my whole take on it. Hi.
Right. No, I kind of get that. Right. There's people. They like to put things down. Right. Put genres down. Right.
And the thing is, like fantasy generally, like commercial fiction generally gets poo-pooed by lots of people. We don't need to poo-poo each other. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Anyway, so that's my take.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. What are we doing? Okay. Thank you so much. And I just want to be clear, I consider everybody on the thing my friend. I wasn't just singling out as Vanessa as my only friend, but
I am his only friend. Don't let him fool you.
Other people like me.
Okay.
And last but certainly not least, CL Cannon. CL, what's your thing?
Just like Vanessa, it was not a term that I had really known about, except for maybe like a couple of years ago. It started getting more popular. And, I checked it out also, tried to figure out, well, what does that mean? Because everybody knows what high fantasy means. And I kind of agree with Vanessa. Like, it's just, why do we have to call it low? Why can't we call it intrusion fantasy? Just sounds kind of awesome. I like that term. But yeah, just fantasy that is intruding into our world where elements, we still have our regular world and there's elements of fantasy coming in and just kind of taking over the narrative. That's low fantasy. I do write a little bit of that. I do write more fairy tale high fantasy a lot of the time, but I have written a lot of more urban fantasy and what we consider low fantasy. So, yeah.
Right. And I think too, there's low fantasy kind of seeps into urban fantasy a little bit, paranormal fantasy a little bit, right? It's mm-hmm. much more like a broad term for those things as opposed to being a thing into itself. That might be one way to look at it.
Yeah.
Also. All right.
Yeah, it feels a lot like an umbrella term for a lot of the fantasy that I think a lot of us write.
Mm-hmm. So. I was just going to say, umbrella term.
Okay. So we'll start with Anita again. When you think about the magic in low fantasy versus high fantasy, what are some things that you wouldn't include in a low fantasy story? Or what are yours? What are your stories?
As far as magic is concerned, I mean, I don't think there's a heck of a lot of difference between the magic of a high fantasy and low fantasy, but it kind of depends on what you're putting in your low fantasy. Like if you're going mythological in your low fantasy, then you have to go by what sort of magic goes with whatever creatures you're using, like fairies or elves or vampires or whatever. I mean, with high fantasy, you get maybe a little more leeway because you can make more shit up. in high fantasy as far as magic goes, because you can really make your own more tailored magic system. I think with low fantasy, because you're incorporating things into the real world, you're more using magic systems and folklore systems, and they already have an established magic to them.
Yep.
So I mean, you can twist it around and tweak it and do a little this and that, but you have more of an established system to work with when you're working with low fantasy as opposed to high fantasy, I think.
But that could be a good thing and bad thing, right? I mean, if it's already got some guidelines for you.
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of, in some ways, it is kind of easier to do that because you've already got the rules in the system and you can just kind of tweak it to your own needs. Because, I mean, these things have most mythologies and folklore and things like that have like 3 dozen different variants of how it works anyway. So you can just pick and choose which ones you like. So that does make it a little easier as opposed to actually sitting down and creating your own magic system from scratch. Yeah. I would say it also presents problems because you have to stay within certain boundaries if you're going to be using those boundaries. And so you have to be a little more creative sometimes. And you also have to make it so that it's not always visible to everybody in a low fantasy, because in a high fantasy, magic can be known and everyone uses it or everyone knows about it. In a low fantasy, it's more often a secret thing, so you have to be recognize that fact as you're writing as well.
Right. Awesome. Tiffany?
I was just going to say about magic. Not everybody has magic usually in low fantasy because it is something more kept secret. So not having every person that you write typically has magic. So it's a little bit harder to determine who gets it, who doesn't get it, and where it comes from. Just like Anita said, if you're using a mythology,
Uh-oh.
Frozen.
Oh, there she
There
is.
she
Okay.
is.
Oh,
Oh.
Tiff, you froze for a minute. Could you just repeat the last minute?
I feel like Anita said, if you're using a mythology, and you're bound by their rules, and if you break them, you have to really go in detail of why you broke it. And so it's a little bit harder to keep, especially in a series, it going with a lot of boundaries in it.
But too, I think that, or would you think, or what do you think, I should say, as an opportunity, like to take myths that we quote unquote know well and sort of turn them on their head a little bit with folk fantasy.
Now, I personally did that in my series. It's about gods, and I've taken them and changed who or what they were. Still within like each mythology, whether it's Greek, African, Asian folklore, they're within that same boundary, but who and what they are have changed. And so you still have to stay by those boundaries, but you do have a little bit of leeway to explain why they're different.
Awesome. Excellent. Thank you much. SG?
So my last series, I created a magic system all from scratch. And it was hidden specifically by the organization that sort of adjudicates it and the magic users. So that was a way of explaining why everyone doesn't have magic in the world of misadventure, and why everyone doesn't know about it. And then, so I think it was challenging because the way I write, I didn't totally, it's a little embarrassing, but I didn't totally flesh out the magic system before I started writing the book. So I discovered it as I went. And so it was it's a unique system where it's not established. like mythology. So you have a lot of that flexibility, but you can also definitely write yourself into a corner if you're not careful.
Do you think that with low fantasy, it's easier to change like the next book? Like if you do something in book 1, but you can make changes that in book 2, or are you less flexible in that regard?
I think it really depends on the author. If you can justify why you're changing it or why you're modifying it, and it makes sense and it doesn't feel like a cop-out or a retcon, or just you're doing it because it's convenient and you know it's easier for you to do it this way than to work within the bounds you've set for yourself. If you can make it feel natural to your system, I think you can definitely do that. For me, after a certain point, I think it was somewhere around, it was towards the beginning of book 2, I decided that like I need to work within the bounds I've set for myself. And I was actually, I think, more strict than the current book I'm writing is actually based on Greek mythology, set in modern day. And I think I give myself more leeway with that because people are already so familiar with the established way things work and who people are. You know, still kind of like Tiffany said, still keeping it related, but branching out more. If they're totally unfamiliar with the system, my approach is to keep it more strict so they know what to expect and they don't get confused, or they don't have to connect the dots too much in a system they don't know. Whereas if you're talking about something as well known as Greek mythology, people can generally put the pieces together.
Right. Gotcha. Thank you so much. Vanessa?
For me, a lot of what people would term low fantasy to me comes down to whether the magic is known or unknown within the world. And so, and I mean, in the world in general. So for me, low fantasy is always about like, you know, the rest of the world doesn't know what's happening, you know, doesn't know people have magic. Some people have magic. And so, I think as for me personally, when I'm writing, as long as I stay within that, then I can kind of do whatever I want. But there are some limitations in that, you know, if a dragon suddenly shows up, then clearly people, you know, that can end up being a conflict, right? So, yeah. So like for me, I don't think the constraints come down to the constraints of the world as the reader knows it. So since I write primarily urban fantasy, it comes down to, you know, what does the reader know? And I think this just goes back to what SG was just saying, is that when you're leaning into what the reader already knows, you don't have to do as much. Whereas if you have to create something out of whole cloth, you have to explain a lot of things. And so for me, if something like as long as it stays within my concept and it stays within the concept of the reader, the concept the reader has of the world, then I can do whatever I want. I don't know if that made any sense. It made sense in my head. Sometimes it doesn't survive the trip out my mouth though. So
this question, since you write vampire, not vampires, that are not vampires, do you feel like the construct you've created for your not vampires extends to other quote unquote mythological creatures? So there'll be werewolves that are not quite werewolves, that sort of thing, or not? Do you think you don't necessarily have to keep all that consistent?
Well, for me, my vampires are not vampires because of the way humans work. So humans, when we see something that we don't necessarily understand, and you can see this in the state of the world today, right now, when we see things we don't understand, we make stuff up to try to make it make sense, right? And so for me, the vampires do what they're going to do. the creatures that are my vampires that are not actually vampires because they're not undead humans, the things that humans saw them do through history created the vampire myth. So it goes back to what someone I think said about turning things on their head. For me, it's about making it not the usual thing that people read. That's what it comes down to for me. I don't know if that answered your question.
Sure, absolutely.
So yes, it could be actually, I've got a 2-book series where both books are like 70% done, where it's zombie, not zombies. So yeah, that's my shtick, I guess.
Awesome. Thank you. Sia, what are your thoughts?
I think one of the things that I really like about magic systems and just general world building and things in low fantasy is where you've already got that established world. There's not a lot of world building that you have to do in the broader term of things. So you can kind of focus more on your magic system, making it unique, or borrowing things from systems that people might already know about and making it feel more real and kind of more tangible, I guess, to the reader than you might be able to do in as many pages on something that's a high fantasy, where you have to put in lots of description. You have to explain all these, the religion of the world and the topography of the world and all the things that, you're going to have to imagine so they can get a clear vision of what is going on. It kind of does the heavy lifting for you when we know that this is set in the real world. And I kind of like that aspect to it. I think that makes writing in low fantasy a little bit easier, but also it just kind of allows you more freedom to really dive into like the characters that you're creating and the lore that you want to set and the reasons why this world is hidden, who knows about it, all of those different kind of questions than what you would have in just a regular low fantasy.
Do you think it makes it easier for readers, and the one reason why urban and paranormal and all that are very popular, do you think it makes it easier for the reader because they already come with a certain level of, these are the myths I know about Earth, here on Earth. Does it make it easier entry for them?
I really think it does. I think it makes it easier for them to be able to readily imagine and be able to kind of take that journey with you without having a bunch of confusion and having to go back and go, okay, well, how did this relate to that? Who's related here? How do these people work with this other kind of people? That there's all kinds of things within a high fantasy that you have to kind of explain, but being in our own world, you kind of just get it like that. It's already kind of there, and you can kind of hit the ground running.
Awesome. Thank you. I want to pivot just briefly into things. In high fantasy or epic fantasy or whatever you want to call Lord of the Rings, you have things, like the One Ring, for instance, doodads, MacGuffins, whatever people want to call them. Not as prevalent in low fantasy, from what I read. Why do you think that is?
I think it really depends on what kind of low fantasy you're talking about, because I do kind of can think of a few off the top of my head that have some epic quests where they're trying to find something, some artifact that's been lost, or something that is really important to them. So I think it just really depends on which low fantasy you're talking about. But I guess especially more with like urban fantasy and things like that, I think they're more character focused than they are on the actual kind of overall quest that you would be going on in a normal fantasy. So maybe that's the reason why.
Okay, awesome. Vanessa? You're muted.
Y'all, I was muted. What I was saying is that I don't necessarily agree with your premise. I think that urban fantasy does have MacGuffins, but I think what the difference is, it's not necessarily on an epic scale the way high fantasy is, right? Usually, often you'll see that characters have to find pieces of something, or a certain number of things, or they have to, get something from an enemy. They have to get, like, the enemy has captured their whatever, and they have to get it back, or something like that. So I don't necessarily agree, but it's not, I don't agree that they're not common in lower fantasy, but I hate that word. But I think that it's just different. And I agree with Courtney that I think a lot of it primarily is because the story is about the characters versus about the epic thing that is happening in this world. And I also have a thing I want to introduce about high fantasy versus low fantasy, but it doesn't really fit right here, but I would like to get to it at some point. So I'm just giving a heads up at that.
Okay, gotcha. I will note that down in my notes. Thank you. SG?
I pretty much agree with everything that's been said. I think that, especially when you're writing in series, which a lot of, especially urban fantasy, and I think just generally low fantasy is written in series, it's not a MacGuffin, but the story itself is kind of just an excuse to hang out with a cool character. In the stuff that I've read, I'm thinking, I'm racking my brain trying to think of like an urban fantasy or low fantasy book where there's been a MacGuffin, and I'm not really coming up with one. And it really is just like whatever the mystery, like a lot of, I'm thinking of Dresden Files. A lot of them they have like those episodic mysteries that are involved. And it's really, it's a fun mystery, but it's just an excuse to do cool magic, So yeah, it's pretty much what they've already said though.
Okay.
It's character driven, and yeah.
Gotcha. Awesome. Tiffany, thank you.
Muted.
Oh, you're muted. Oh, yeah, we still can't hear you.
Apparently, I hit it twice.
Okay.
I knew I was going to mute myself and not know it. But I do believe it is mainly character driven. Typically, it is more focused on, I don't want to say like the hero's journey, but how they react to the journey. Now there are little things here and there, like, if you're doing a retelling of a modern day, like King Arthur, they, finding the sword would be, a little quest for them to do, but it would be mainly how the characters develop getting to that quest.
Gotcha. Awesome. Yeah, Excalibur was one of the things I had in mind when I was thinking about that question, for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you. AF?
Okay, as a writer who has actually written a contemporary Arthurian fantasy, yeah, they do. Those little artifacts do kind of show up in my books. Excalibur, the Grail. Book 2 is all about finding the Hallows of Britain. So I think whether or not you've got artifacts and things in your low fantasy, it kind of depends on the mythology you're using. Like if you're using Arthurian mythology, yeah, you're going to have something. You're going to have Excalibur. You're going to have the Holy Grail. You're going to have something from those myths included. If you're doing, say, vampires, maybe not so much. If you're doing zombies or whatever, maybe not so much. It all depends on what you're incorporating into your low fantasy as to whether or not your artifacts and your quests and things are going to be foremost and present.
Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate that. All right. So as soon as I find... Oh, here we go. Hold on just a moment for me. I'm looking for the indie connection.
Uh-oh, what if it didn't get moved over?
I don't know. I will...
I mean, Courtney's right here. You're muted,
That's true.
Courtney.
Courtney, can you do us a live indie connection?
You're muted, Courtney. Courtney, you're muted. Courtney, you're muted.
I was gonna say I'm not doing it live, and if you knew how much I messed up every time I do those and how much editing I have to do, you would never want me to do it live.
Yeah, then we will take a brief minute. Vanessa, go ahead and ask your question while I see if I can move over the indicator.
Okay. So one of the things I was thinking about, because I don't like the term low fantasy, this is exactly where it came from. I'll just be honest about that. And one of the things that I kind of recognize is that historically, much high fantasy was written by men, and low fantasy, especially modern, is, I mean, yes, men write in it, but it is like overwhelmingly written by women and femme presenting people, I think. So I wonder if anybody else has made that observation, and if, like, I mean, I just toss it out there.
I mean, it makes sense. I mean,
Absolutely.
it makes sense in the way that it doesn't make sense, that it shouldn't be that way, but yeah.
But
it makes sense in the fact that like high fantasy came first and then low fantasy came along, and whoever was writing high fantasy must have given the low fantasy label to whoever came first, and they were all men, and there you go.
Well, a lot of low fantasy has evolved out of folklore and fairy tales too, which is probably attracts women more than it does men as far as writing it goes. So that makes sense anyway. And personally, I prefer the term contemporary fantasy to low fantasy.
Same.
But
I also think that it has a sort of power behind it for writing in our world and giving somebody that represents maybe ourselves as a character the power to do things that normal people don't. They can enact change that doesn't necessarily mean that it's happening in the world, but they would like to see. If we identify with our character, giving them power to do things that might be going on in our lives now as well, where women face that, or facing people face more oppression than men. So it makes sense that men typically write in a fictional world where women write in a real world.
I think that's a really, really good observation, Tiffany, really. And also another thing is that I think generally speaking, women tend to make connection with people. Like we enjoy connection for connection, right? And in a lot of ways, at least in Western culture, particularly American culture, I think, is that men like big epic things. Men like, military history and how everything works militarily, but not as much about the human stories, right? And I think that also lends, and I think this goes to what we were talking about earlier about characters, about how contemporary fantasy, I'm going to go with that as well. Contemporary fantasy tends to be about characters and about the connection of characters and how characters work together to make a thing happen. And epic fantasy isn't always, I mean, it's not that it doesn't have those traits, but it's less common, I think. What do you guys think?
And I think high fantasy typically has more fighting, more armies fighting.
Large scale fighting.
Yeah, scale.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Than
I also
low fantasy does. Not saying that low fantasy can't have fight scenes, but it is more of I have to beat this hurdle to get to the end goal, and not just my.
It's not that the fight is the end goal necessarily.
Yeah. And it's a lot more like up close and personal too, if it's 1-on-1 or 2-on-2 or whatever. I think it's interesting if kind of to build on this, if there's an element of control involved as well, because when you build a whole world, you influence all of it, and you can make people do whatever you want. Whereas if you're working in the real world, it's it's got its own challenges, but it's a little bit more like you're compromising a lot. So I wonder if it's just this like a sentimentality or some sort of psychology that goes into that too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I think, go ahead, Anita.
I was gonna say it's more grounded too, because I mean, it takes longer, like to go from place to place in a contemporary fantasy because you're doing it by car, as opposed to say a high fantasy where you're doing it by, say, dragon.
I mean, I wonder which. Like, I feel like the dragon would go way faster.
Yeah, I think so too. Anyway.
But you don't. But you also don't have heat, so it's going to be pretty freaking cold up there.
I don't know if dragon powered furnace, then maybe.
Well, yeah. I mean, I guess it depends on the physiology of the dragon, right?
Awesome.
Okay, Sean. I feel like we've gone pretty far afield now, and
It's all good.
I don't know.
just like
I thought it
jumped
was
in
fun.
there.
All right, so let's go ahead and have the indie time for the indie connection. Yay!
Hey guys, C.O. Cannon here from Fiction Atlas Press, bringing you another Indie Connection. And today I'd like to tell you about some indie books that you might enjoy if you're a fan of Matched by Ali Condi. The first book I have for you is called Repression Ground by E.M. Carter. Indoctrinated, unnamed, still behind the barriers under the shadow of a desperate secret. Decades after the Great Plague that took out most of the population in Britain, the New Day Party ruled Newland with an iron fist. Kids are raised by the state in training houses and people judged on their usefulness to the state on an X Factor-style game show. Girl C has never known another way. She can't wait for her productivity ceremony on her 17th birthday, where at last she'll be assigned a name of her own. She's certain of one thing: the party only wants good for all its citizens. But when her only two friends, one hated, one illegal, challenge the narrative, the questions won't stop. Who is she? Why is she defective? What really happened in the before? But asking questions and awakening the reality of a repressed world full of secrets and shadows turns out to be treachery against the state. Thrown into the compound jail, she finds herself in grave danger, and together with girl P and boy T, she must find a way out before it's too late. Can she escape the all-powerful party forces, discover her identity, and survive her harsh new world? The second book I have for you is called Project Finn Island by Maya C. Klinger. After he discovers a dark secret lurking beneath the surface of Finn Island, a 14-year-old boy must confront tyranny and indifference to save his loved ones. 2175. The world is governed by the cold and alienating head office. Input slots are installed in the brains of 6-year-olds, and all kids are forbidden to form relationships until the age of 14. On top of that, every adult who reaches the age of 60 is forced to move to an isolated and remote region, Finn Island. Like most teenagers, Ruby G leads a lonely, boring life. His only entertainment is escaping to the virtual world of the Mind Cloud, until, on his 14th birthday, Ruby G is assigned a role as a guide for new students at his study center. There he meets Daria, a fiercely independent girl without an input slot and with a fresh take on the world. But his life truly takes a turn when, a day after, Ruby G receives a dire warning from his mother's distressed assistant. She warns him about a vicious plan that his mother, who oversees Finn Island at the head office, is about to execute. With Daria's help, Ruby G races against time to save the island's residents, including his own grandfather, from a terrible fate. The deeper Ruby G dives into his journey, the harder it is to accept the truth that shatters everything he's ever believed. Can one teenage boy go against the all-powerful head office? And even worse, his own mother? The third book I have for you is called Hourglass by Elizabeth Means. What would you do if you knew exactly when you would die? Like everyone else in the 24th century United States, ambitious young scientist Evergreen Mason knows the precise minute she will die. When she hears that a 16-year-old girl has surpassed her predicted lifespan, she is compelled to solve the existential riddle of what allowed her to be the only known survivor of her biological clock. But Evergreen's unrelenting search for answers is not without peril. The shocking truth could bring society to its knees, and those in power will stop at nothing to keep it secret. Can Evergreen expose the government's ghastly plots, or will the next clock that stops be her own? And the last book I have for you is called Rise of the Y by Angela D. Shelton. The rebellion is about to begin. The Imperium controls everything. They arrange marriages, dictate professions, and orchestrate everyone's destiny. But 17-year-old Lexi refuses to accept. She's ready to ignite a revolution of her own, but fate has other plans. When a hidden diary falls into her hands, its weathered pages whisper of rebellion and hope. Now Lexi is thrust into the perilous shadows of the elusive rebel group Y. In a whirlpool of danger, deceit, and forbidden alliances, every ally could be an enemy, every truth could be a lie, and falling in love? That was never part of the plan. Caught between duty and a yearning for freedom, Lexi navigates a treacherous path where love and loyalty are tested at every turn. Who can she trust in a world where betrayal lurks around every corner? As Imperium's iron grip on dystopian Atlanta grows stronger, Lexi must decide how much she's willing to sacrifice in her fight for freedom. Okay, that's all for me this week. I'll see you next week on the Indie Connection. Bye!
Man, there goes my TBR again.
I know. You wouldn't.
Thanks, Courtney.
Sorry.
All right, let's catch up on the comments a little bit. Let's be Fantasy Space. Thanks to Vanessa's comment about magic on a space station. El Mengol is here. Hello. And yep, talking about his next novel in sequence. And Vanessa saying hello. Hello. Everybody saying hello. Gotcha. Awesome. We're glad you made it, AL. Yeah, it took us a while to arrive as well, for sure. But we made it. So, and laughs and laughs and laughs. Okay, awesome. As usual, as folks know, I a lot of times like to turn this to point towards newer writers, and advice that we can give them. So, and I'll throw this out to anybody, to the new writer who wants to get into contemporary fantasy or fantasy that's not, more embedded in earth, however you want to talk about it. What's your advice? What's a thing that you would tell them to do?
Sorry, my cat is trying to comment. I would say read more low fantasy, contemporary fantasy, and read lots of them. The best way to know how to do something is to learn from example. Read them, study them, figure out, read the reviews, see what works for people, what doesn't work for people. And then also, just put your own, at the end of the day, it has to be your own story. So put your own spin on things. But the best way to learn anything at all in this world is to watch somebody else do it, to emulate the good things that they're doing, to take out all the bad things they might be doing, and put your own spin on it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yes. I would also say understand how the world works. I mean, we all live in the world, but not all of us understand how aspects of the world work. So I agree 100% with Courtney. I just don't want to repeat what she said. So what she said, and then also, like, if you are doing something where the government is A, B, C, D, X, Y, Z doing things, understand how that government in current times works. Like how is change affected? How, what is the actual law around what you have going on? How could that happen? And, again, you can look at real life right now with what's happening, and so many people don't understand what is legal and what is not. And so understanding your world on a more on a depth that is a little bit beyond what the normal day-to-day person knows.
I think that's excellent advice.
Yeah, and related to that, I would say if you're just starting out, use a setting that you're familiar with.
Yeah.
It will make things so much easier. Because it's your characters are out and about in your city or your town or wherever you're setting it, and you know where they're going and you know how to get there, and you're already familiar with all this. It will cut down on so much research. It will cut down on so much starting and stopping when you're writing it. So easiest way to start out in it, writing a contemporary fantasy is to put it in a setting that you're already familiar with.
Excellent. I think that's really good advice. Sure.
And if you don't like any of the settings that you're familiar with, you can make up a town too, in current day, but the town can be fake. That's also fair. For my part, when I write, I always start with character first and then story. So like your magic system can be really unique. It should be unique if you're using magic. The world needs to be well built or well understood. But your character is going to be the engine, as we've been talking about. Contemporary fantasy, or low fantasy, as this show is called, is really heavily character focused. So you're really going to want to spend time building out your main character and your secondary character, or if it's a love interest or whatever. And then also make sure you're spending a little time building out your second and tertiary characters as well, because they are also part of this world that you're building too. So they should feel unique and special as much.
Cool. Excellent. Awesome. Tiffany?
It would be my advice that I give anytime that you write anything is find your voice, know what you want to say with your story. Whether it's contemporary fantasy, whether it's high fantasy, whether it's, romance or whatever, just know who you are and don't get lost in somebody else's world trying to make it theirs and not yours.
Excellent. Awesome. Thank you so much. Well, thank everyone for being here today. I think it's been a pretty good topic, and I think we have covered some good ground for what the idea of what low fantasy was, and some of its origins and some of its social impact. I think maybe is a good way to put it. The discussion from Vanessa's part of the question, where we're talking about the demographic of folks who do write for the most part. So I think that was really interesting, Vanessa. Thank you for bringing that up. Okay, so this week we're going to do, let me see if my notes are there. Nope, that's all right. So let me go ahead and grab our this week for our Goni Minute. Okay, so all times are Easter time. Just folks already know that, but I'm letting you know. Monday at 7, we have 21 grams with our friend of the show, JD Estrada. Joe talks to JD. Tuesday, we have a first time for everything, part of season 3, where Juliet is with, hold on, I will get the name. Well, Juliet has a guest. My apologies, I can't read the name on that. Wednesday, I'll be here doing Zero Means You're Dead Live, which is going to be kind of the new format for Zero Means You're Dead. Even though we'll still have going forward after this month, we'll have a recorded interview or other recorded parts. But this month, we're going to start doing it live, which should be exciting. And then we have page number on Saturday. We have page numbers with Bob Magoo, where he speaks to Ben Meeks, and that talks about the business side of being an indie self-published author. So hopefully you will join us in all our shows this week. Right. And we had Ariel come in and ask some questions about urban fantasy, and Vanessa was kind enough to kind of recap some of the conversations we were having. So, and yes, contemporary fantasy would be a better term. I think I agree with that. Okay, so now it is time for the epilogue, where we have our panelists read an excerpt from one of their works. Anita, are you okay with going first?
Yep.
Okay, so I'm going to pop up the QR code for Anita's work, and A.F. Stewart, please take that away.
Okay, I just want to say this is from Eternal Mist, which is the prequel to the Camelot Immortal series, and this introduces the character of Martin, who started out as kind of a villain. So, okay, so I reached into my purse, pulled out a hex bag, and threw it at Martin. It smacked into his chest and exploded in a burst of magical energy that slammed the twit against the back of the wall. His magical illusion vanished, leaving us surrounded by the shabby reality of a cramped, cluttered storeroom and office. I walked over to the moaning would-be wizard sprawled on the dusty floor and grabbed him by the shirt front. "Where's Elaine?" Morgan leaned in, her face inches from my shoulder. "I would tell her if I were you. She can do some very nasty things to people who cross her." He wiggled like a worm on a hook. "I don't care what you do. I won't tell. I won't ever tell." I slapped the sniveling little nutter across the mouth and then gave him a quick jab to the belly. He folded like a paper fan. "What did you do that for?" His whiny voice grated in my ears. "Because you won't talk, you ninny." I turned to Morgan. "Did you bring your dagger?" She smiled and drew out her blade, lovely and sharp. Martin blanched. What are you going to do with that?" "Just a little torture. What do you think, Morgan? Start with cutting off the ears?" "Sounds dandy to me." "No, you can't." Martin clamped his hands over his ears and started babbling. "Don't hurt me. Don't hurt me. I didn't mean any harm. Please don't hurt me." "Then tell us where Elaine is hiding." "It doesn't matter. You're too late. She left me here and went after it. She's taken her champions to chase the Grail." "Champions?" "Yes, Percival and Galahad." "Wonderful. Those two yahoos were up to their ears with it in Elaine. The mess kept getting better." I glared at Martin, grabbed Morgan's dagger, and pressed it against his throat. "Tell me everything." And that was the introduction of the character of Martin.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much. Tiffany?
Okay, give me 1 second.
Sure, sure. And the QR code is up for Tiffany's work.
Okay, this is introducing our one of the elements. His name is Tootie, and he is the element of the ground, and he is with his parents right now in his home, but he got mad and he leaves. So it says the garden looked like it was dancing in the wind as he walked along the path. He went into the middle of the garden where a small space was left open for him to sit in. It was his favorite spot, surrounded by the earth and the air, no one judging him. The ground felt like it shook with each of his steps, like it was leading him to his spot. The wind let out a big sigh, sending his thick black hair off his forehead. Tootie sat and ran his fingers through the dirt. It was like the ground lifted up into his hands. He loved the smell of the dirt. He heard of people stopping to smell the roses, but he loved to stop and smell the dirt. There was no better smell than the earth. He often felt like he was more at home among the earth and plants than he was in the small shack that they called home. He watched the boats enter and leave the docks, men packing crates and boxes on the ship. He wondered what it would be like to hop on one of the boats and just let it take off to anywhere but here. He watched as few young men were fishing with fishing hooks walk by his home. They looked over at him. He watched as they pointed and laughed. Anger crept into his heart. He hated that he was living this life like he had. Why couldn't he just have a normal life? He should be out there with them, hanging with friends. His anger traveled through his body, reaching his fingers. He felt the anger in his fingertips. He clutched his fists. The ground trembled around him, shaking the house and the sea. He watched the men run back to the village. And that was the beginning of him finding his powers.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing with us. All right. SG, are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready. So the picture that's... Sorry.
Yep. There we go. You're good.
Okay. So yeah, the picture that's up on my side is the fourth book in the Death by Misadventure series. This is the first one, which I'll be reading from. So the two main characters are following their Mark, a bad guy, through a nightclub. The bad guy is taken off, and they are about to chase after him. I keep myself pressed to the wall and hope Brightling will do the same. Maybe I should grab his hand to make sure we don't lose each other. Would that be weird? Or a blood-curdling screech fills the room, louder than the crowd and somehow even louder than the music. Freezing in place, I turn my head to the dance floor. Spigots of oily black smoke coil upward, forming a cloud that looms precariously over the undulating, oblivious crowd. No, not a cloud. A cosmos. Christ. Brightling stares at the scourge with a horror that mirrors mine. He grabs me by the hand and runs. Whoa, I stumble over my heels again. Why didn't I take them off like I normally do? As he drags me toward the exit. Another screech grabs my attention. The spigots have stopped spewing their black smoke, but the cosmos remains. No one else seems to notice it up there, twisting and shimmering in the swirling disco lights. Are Brightling and I the only ones that can see it? Or is everyone too blissed out on reverie? It's got to be one or the other for all of them to miss a creature the size of a great white shark hanging right above their heads. It even moves like a shark as it shoots through the air toward me, except that its eyes are shock white instead of dull black. The teeth, however, those are the same. My breath catches in my throat. That thing is going to chomp me in half. Suddenly, I'm flying. My hands slam into the door, then through it, and I'm out. With nothing between me and the sidewalk, I fall forward onto my hands and knees. If I were here, it would hurt like a bitch. Whew, that was close, I sigh, turning toward Brightling. But there's no one there.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that so much. Vanessa, give me just a moment. There we go. You're okay.
Oh, you're muted. You're muted.
You're muted.
Okay, sorry about that. I bet y'all are real happy catching me when I'm muted. So this is from Javaja, which is book 1 of the Soul Cavern series. This is from the first chapter. Our main character, Mecca, is in a parking lot and has just been attacked. Okay, here we go. Mecca's heart thumped hard against her breastbone. Everything had happened so fast. His attack, her response. Now, crouched over him, she found the arm in her grasp thinning, becoming more frail, until she could feel the actual bone between her fingers. His dark hair grayed and then wafted to the concrete like so many delicate feathers. He withered. Superimposed over his form like a double exposed negative, the cavern where his soul would have resided spread before her. It should have been bathed in golden light. Instead, a small ball of gold looked to be tethered to the walls with thick, silver-gray tendrils. She closed her eyes to block out the reality behind the image of the cavern. She tugged at the golden life force within him. Its colored fringes had already washed out to a pale pink. The silver tethers which held it stretched and then popped one by one. Mecca surrounded the sad little ball with her own energy, gold with blue fringes, as it began to come away. The captive energy swung free from its bonds, momentarily bathing the cold, dank cavern in light. It hurled into Mecca. Her own life force, the little part of her soul she'd sent into him, crashed back to her, breaking her hold on his frail arm. She toppled onto her ass between the cars, sharp pain vibrating up her spine. Energy tore through her, mixing with her adrenaline. The red-hot spike shuddered through her body and along her limbs. It reached her toes and then bounced back and shot through her entire body again. Her skin tingled electric. There we go.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that with us. C.O. Cannon. Let me get it.
I'm going to read you a little bit from Fool Me Twice. And give you a little bit of backstory because kind of complicated. The main character that I'm going to be reading about is called Samuel, and he is an immortal. He can shapeshift, and he's kind of on this vengeance quest. And he has met up with someone who has wronged him, and he's confronting them. So just go ahead. I watched from my perch as a middle-aged woman with wild, rust-colored hair shuffles across the walkway, sit on one of the abandoned park benches. Her steps are more deliberate now, and it seems she's found the confidence to stop staring at her feet. Her eyes are still dotted with emerald green. She darts them from side to side as she tries to detect my presence. I glide down from my perch soundlessly, transforming from a raven into my human form in midair. My feet rustle in the autumn leaves as I land behind the bench. What have you done with it, Athlia? The woman jumps, twisting around to face me. I always forget that you can do that, she says, clasping her hand over her heart. It's creepy, if you ask me. No one did. Now where have you stashed the talisman? I asked, growing impatient with her stalling. She obviously doesn't have it on her. She's too smart for that. It's in a safe place. My son, who I believe you met earlier, gave it to his friends for safekeeping. 2 little armas stranded outside the sacred city. They shouldn't be too difficult to find. So, betraying your own kind now. Branching out, are we? I am no kind but my own. I don't belong to either of you. I consider her position for a moment. How queer it must be to belong nowhere and inspire no one. As sickening as the Arma and their human worship is, at least they believe in something. My gladios serve me faithfully, while also maintaining a semblance of freedom. They respect one thing, my power and unwillingness to yield to the human. Athia has none of that. She's been playing the sides against each other for too long, and her game of cat and mouse is about to abruptly end if I have any say in the matter. You know, you almost had me all those years ago, I muse, walking slowly and deliberately to face her at the front of the bench. I really thought you were just an innocent soul I'd saved from undue suffering. She scoffs. Oh, we all know you've always been weak to a pretty girl in distress, Samuel. Isn't that what got you into the situation to begin with? She thinks she knows me after all these years. She's only seen what I've allowed her to see and only knows what I've allowed her to know. But I have far more knowledge of her dealings. I heard you made some questionable judgment calls yourself, marrying that Arma boy, Sydney. Tell me, did you look him in the eye when you stuck the knife in his heart? Or are you too much of a coward to do it yourself? Her jaw clenches. That wounded her. I loved Sydney. I did what was necessary, which is more than I can say for you. You could have anything you want, dominion over all, yet you waste your years on a glorified treasure hunt. My affairs are my own. At least I have a little thing called loyalty, I shoot back. You can keep your loyalty, and you can keep your savior. I don't care anymore. But you will allow me and my son safe travel away from all of this. And why would I do that? I ask, curious to know what she thinks she has over me. Because I'm tired. I'm tired of running. I'm tired of pretending to be someone I'm not. You told me you'd help me unlock my potential. Turns out I didn't need you after all. I know how to destroy the talisman. Impossible. There's only one other soul who knew how to destroy the talisman, and that soul happened to be trapped inside said amulet. I assure you, all things are possible if you know who to ask.
Awesome. Great. Thank you so much for sharing that. I encourage everybody who's going to watch now or in the future to definitely pick up the books of our panelists. Helps them in ways you can't even imagine. So please feel free to do that. All right. So we're going to start with CL. Tell folks where they can find you on the internet. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's not CL.
That's not
CL. I can be found on my website, clcannon.net, and at fictionatlas.com. On most social media, like TikTok, although I'm really only on there for like Stranger Things edits and stuff like that. I don't really post as much as I should. I am on Facebook, obviously, Blue Sky, Threads. I'm no longer on Twitter, and I'll never be on Snapchat because I hate it. And yeah, you can find any of my books on Amazon. They're on Apple. They're on all the things. So yeah, go find them. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks for being here. Great discussion today. Vanessa.
You can find all my links right there. That's where you can find me. Also, I do want to note that Javaja, which I just read from, is on sale on Amazon right now for 99 cents. It's in Kindle Unlimited as well. So if you've got that, don't worry about it. But it is on sale until December 3rd. And even though I know there's an economic blackout for big box companies, that doesn't count for authors. So you can go to Amazon and buy from authors. So 99 cents. All the places.
Thank you. Thanks as always for participating. SG.
Yeah. So like Vanessa, you can find my stuff at my website right down there. I am on Misadventure is on Kindle Unlimited, so you can only get it on Amazon right now. My other series, Dead Mall, is available wide. I didn't talk about that today, but it's out there too. I am on primarily Instagram, a little bit on Facebook. I should get on TikTok. I'm on it, but I don't really use it. But should that ever change, all that stuff is listed on my website. So you can always find where I am and am not there.
Awesome. Thank you. And you can also see SG playing in a lot of our Hit the Dice role-playing games.
Yep. Cryptid Capture Core. Come
Yeah.
watch it.
And the same with Tiffany Vega, who's also a member of the Cryptid Capture Corps.
Yes, I'm loving it, and I want to play more of it. But you can find me right here somewhere at outsiderpublishingcompany.com. You can find my socials and our socials there on the website. We're also on Kindle Unlimited as well as myself. And if you liked book 1, book 2 will be out in 2026. I have a cover and a title for it already that is going to be announced real soon. So keep your eyes out for that.
Awesome. Thanks for being here. And we'll be in touch for the next Cryptid Capture Corps for sure.
Yes.
And AF Stewart.
Okay, you can find me at afstewart.ca. I'm on pretty much all the social medias, Facebook, Twitter, although I'm not over on Twitter much. Blue Sky, I do have a TikTok. I don't use it much. Instagram, YouTube. I host To Trope or Not to Trope here on Go Indie Now. I host the Shadows and Ink podcast for Crystal Lake Publishing. And my latest book dropped on Thursday, Tales of the Norse Gods, and it features Loki and an evil chicken. So,
Yes,
so
pick up the Evil Chicken book, folks.
Amazing.
Yeah. Anyway, so that came out on Thursday. That's the newest release. Paperback is available on Amazon. The ebook is available everywhere. So
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks for being here again. All right, everyone in the audience, thank you for watching. If you watched, thank you for watching later on. If you're watching it, yes, the evil chicken. If you're watching it on Memorex, as I say, I am SM Hillman. I do this every other weekend or sometimes 2 weekends in a row. You also find me doing this week, Zero Means You're Dead, our RPG new indie news podcast. And occasionally I GM, and once in a while I play on Hit the Dice. We're having, in the new year, we're going to be having a Hit the Dice special as well, as we do an actual play, 12 weeks of the multi-Borg. If you're familiar with Morkborg, we're redesigning the game for a multiverse type of adventure. So that should be exciting. Yep, absolutely. And so, yes, thanks everyone for being here. Thank my panelists, who are fantastic people and were great as always. Thanks for Joe for jumping in real quick on his Sunday to help us fix our technical issues. And it's always time. Go Indie Now. Have a good Sunday, folks.